She thought she was buying scrap metal, but what Marley Reyes found inside that rusted container would change everything we know about time itself. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? And if you love stories about hidden relics, forgotten technology, and secrets buried in time, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button, because what happens next will leave you speechless. The wind swept through the empty industrial yard, stirring up dust and the dry scent of iron and rust. Marley Reyes cut the engine of her battered pickup and stepped out, the slam of her door echoing through the silence. Her denim jacket flapped in the hot Louisiana air as she squinted at the crooked sign that hung from a rusted chain-link fence. Lot 34B, salvage and miscellaneous scrap. It didn't look like much, but then again, neither did most of her finds. Marley had spent her whole life among machines, broken, forgotten, abandoned. She'd learned to rebuild engines before she could drive one, her father's hands guiding hers as they pieced together lives from metal and bolts. "Every machine's got a story," he used to say. "You just gotta listen with your gut." Those words had carried her through years of grease, debt, and long nights in her small New Orleans shop. But today, standing in that deserted yard, surrounded by twisted cranes and collapsed hangars, even her gut felt uneasy. The place was too quiet, the air too still. Not a bird, not a hum of electricity. Just the sound of her boots crunching through gravel as she scanned the rows of rusted wreckage. She came looking for cheap salvage, maybe an old lift motor or gear housing she could flip for parts. What she found was something else entirely. Behind a wall of weeds, half buried in the ground, sat a shipping container. It was large, 20 feet long, deep red under streaks of rust, tilted slightly to one side where the earth had caved beneath it. Most would have ignored it, written it off as junk. But something about it caught her eye. The paint wasn't just faded, it looked scorched, scrubbed clean of any markings. The usual numbers and tracking codes were gone, replaced by one long, blank strip of bare steel. Marley walked closer, brushing her fingers along the cool surface. No graffiti, no dents, just silence. The container's handles were locked tight with industrial-grade bolts, the kind that hadn't been made for decades. Whoever sealed it didn't want it opened. That didn't scare her. It intrigued her. The auction paperwork hadn't mentioned anything about a container. Lot 34B was listed simply as miscellaneous scrap material, unclaimed debris. But this was deliberate. Marley's brow furrowed. Maybe it was old government storage or a construction firm's forgotten inventory. Either way, it was hers now. She'd already paid the $1,100 bid, probably too much, but something about this box tugged at her in a way she couldn't explain, like it had been waiting for her. By late afternoon, she'd called the auction office to confirm ownership, signed the release, and arranged for delivery. When the flatbed truck rumbled up to her shop the next morning, the driver hopped out whistling low. "This thing smells like secrets," he said, slapping the side of the container. Marley just nodded. "Drop it next to the workshop." Once the truck pulled away, she circled the container slowly. Its presence felt wrong somehow. Too still, too untouched. She knelt beside the latch, brushing off layers of dirt. A faint, almost burned symbol peeked through, the outline of a broken wing. Beneath it, 3 letters barely visible under grime. EMB. She frowned. EMB? Didn't sound like any shipping company she knew. Inside her shop, the hum of old fans filled the silence as she rolled up her sleeves. The sun glared through the windows, striping the concrete floor in golden shadow. Marley grabbed her cutting tools, a grinder, and a crowbar. She wasn't one for waiting on curiosity. By noon, the first bolt was half cut. By 1:30, the metal groaned under her pry bar. When the first door finally creaked open, a rush of stale air escaped, cool and heavy, smelling of dust and oil. She coughed, waving her hand through the haze, and flicked on her flashlight. Something glimmered inside. At first, she thought it was just metal shelving, maybe a stack of parts, but as her beam moved deeper into the dark, it caught the smooth curve of steel, the faint outline of treads. Not tires, tracks. Marley froze. Her pulse kicked up, echoing in her ears. She stepped closer. The machine sat under a thick beige tarp, edges clamped tight. She tugged it with one hand. It didn't move. Grunting, she braced a boot against the container floor and pulled harder. The fabric tore free with a sharp rip. What lay beneath made her forget how to breathe. A sleek, low vehicle, matte black and crimson, armored and compact, not military, too refined, not industrial, too precise. Its body was wide and flat, resting on heavy treads built for rough terrain. The front was shaped for speed, the sides layered with plated panels, no dust, no corrosion. It gleamed like it had been sealed yesterday. Marley's hands trembled as she ran her fingers along the cool metal. The surface was impossibly clean, almost waxed. She leaned closer to the front panel and caught her reflection in the glass. Sharp eyes, dark skin, curls tied back, a thin line of grease still streaked across her jaw. She looked like herself, yet somehow older, as if the reflection wasn't quite in sync. Then she saw it. On the inside of the windshield, taped near the edge, was a photograph. She pulled it free, careful not to tear the brittle edges. The picture showed a group of people standing in front of the same machine, except it was painted entirely black, no red markings. The image was dated May 1987. Everyone in the photo wore jumpsuits and badges. Their faces were blurred or scratched out, except one. A woman in the center, staring directly into the camera. Marley's breath caught. The woman had her same face, same jawline, same eyes, even the faint freckle beneath the right cheekbone. She stumbled back, heart thudding, staring at the photo like it might explain itself. It didn't. The bottom corner bore a faint label, Redbird Project, EMB-09 Field Crew. Redbird? Marley whispered the name, the sound strange on her tongue. She turned the photo over. Handwritten words stretched across the back in faded ink. Final prototype complete. Test phase begins Monday. Prototype. Her flashlight beam flicked over the vehicle again. The plated panels, the reinforced chassis, the untouched bolts. Not abandoned. Preserved. Something in her chest tightened. This wasn't just old scrap, this was buried history. She stepped out of the container, gulping the warm air like she'd been underwater. The sun was sinking now, bleeding gold across the cracked asphalt. For a moment, she considered locking it up again, pretending she hadn't seen what she'd seen, but she couldn't. The photograph trembled slightly in her hand. Marley Reyes had spent her life fixing what others threw away. Engines, machines, forgotten stories. But this machine wasn't calling to be fixed. It was calling to be found. She looked back once more at the shadowed interior of the container, the black and red frame gleaming faintly in the dying light. A shiver ran down her spine. She didn't know it yet, but when she'd pried open those steel doors, she hadn't just uncovered a relic. She'd opened the first crack in a secret that time itself had tried to bury, and whatever waited inside EMB-09 wasn't done with her yet. The night after Marley opened the container, sleep refused to come. The image of that black and crimson machine burned behind her eyelids every time she closed them. She sat at her kitchen table, the photograph spread out in front of her beside a half-empty cup of coffee gone cold. The woman in the picture, her face, stared back with the same quiet confidence, the same gaze that made her stomach twist. Outside, the city hummed its late-night rhythm, distant sirens, the whir of a passing truck, the low rumble of the bayou wind. But inside her house, time felt different. Slower, thicker. By morning, Marley decided she needed answers. The internet gave her nothing. She searched COMB09, Redbird Project, Emberline Technologies, even Ironfield Yard. But everything led to blank pages or archived links that timed out. It was like the project never existed. Her father once told her, "If the web's too clean, the truth's been scrubbed." So she went to the one place that still kept dust instead of data, the town library. The building sat at the edge of old Jefferson Parish, its brick walls warped by humidity and years. Inside, the air smelled of paper and mildew. The overhead lights flickered faintly, as though they too had grown tired of keeping secrets. Behind the front desk, an elderly volunteer with silver curls and glasses perched at the end of her nose looked up from a crossword. "You looking for something particular, sweetheart?" she asked. "Archives," Marley said, showing the photograph. "Industrial, late 80s. There used to be a research annex near Ironfield. You got records on that?" The woman squinted at the photo, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Ironfield. Lord, I ain't heard that name in decades. Follow me." They passed through a door marked Records Authorized Use Only, into a back room lined with metal filing cabinets and boxes labeled in faded marker. The air was still and heavy, filled with the smell of old ink and glue. "Most of this hasn't been touched since '92, the woman said. "Knock yourself out, baby. I'll be up front if you need me." Hours passed. Marley combed through zoning records, city plans, government contracts. Her hands grew black with dust. She was ready to give up when she found it. A folded newspaper clipping taped inside a binder. The headline read, "Ironfield Research Annex to Close. Federal Oversight Ends After Containment Breach." The article was brief, but one line snagged her attention. "Facility transferred to private entity Emberline Technologies, subsidiary of Latimer Defense Systems." There it was again. Emberline. She kept digging. A yellowed blueprint marked with faded pen lines showed a vehicle test range EMB09, restricted access. Another note scribbled in red ink read simply, "Test phase halted. Redbird unaccounted for." Marley's pulse quickened. Redbird wasn't just a code name. It was a person. She gathered everything she could, copies of the articles, blueprints, and any document that mentioned the project, and packed them into a folder. The librarian, Edna, looked at her stack when she returned. "Find what you needed?" "More than I wanted," Marley murmured. As she stepped outside, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Unknown number. She hesitated, thumb hovering. Then she answered. "Miss Reyes," a man's voice said. Calm, old, measured. "You've been looking into Ironfield." Marley froze on the steps. "Who is this?" "You don't need my name, but I need you to understand. That machine wasn't meant to be opened." The line went dead. She stood there for a long moment, phone pressed to her ear, heart pounding. The early afternoon sun burned against her skin, but all she felt was cold. By the time she got back to her shop, the world felt wrong. Too quiet, too expectant. The container sat in the side lot, the machine inside still gleaming under a thin layer of dust. Marley walked toward it like someone drawn to a memory instead of an object. The photo was still on her workbench, next to the copied documents and an untouched cup of coffee from that morning. She sat down, staring at the face in the picture again. That same dark skin tone, those same sharp eyes, that same freckle beneath the cheekbone. It wasn't possible, but it was real. Then a sound. 3 knocks at the door. Not loud, Precise. Marley's head shot up. She hadn't told anyone about the container. The shop's front lights were off. Her truck was parked behind the lot. No one should have known she was here. Another knock. She grabbed the heavy wrench from her work table and moved toward the front door. Through the narrow glass pane, she saw a silhouette. A tall man in a brown leather coat standing under the flickering streetlight. He didn't look like a cop or a thief, just someone waiting. Marley cracked the door, keeping the chain latched. "We're closed." "I'm not here for repairs," the man said evenly. His voice was the same one from the phone. "I'm here for answers." Her grip tightened on the wrench. "Who are you?" He hesitated, then said, "Name's Bishop. I worked at Ironfield before everything went dark." The name hit her like static. "You were part of this?" she asked. He nodded once. "More than part of it." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind rattled the sign outside, and somewhere in the distance a dog barked. Finally, Marley unlatched the chain. "Come in." Bishop stepped inside, his boots leaving faint prints on the concrete floor. He looked around the workshop, the cluttered tools, the photograph on the bench, the stack of copied documents, and then his gaze fell on the open container outside. His eyes softened, almost painfully. "So it's still intact," he murmured. "All these years." "What is it?" Marley asked, crossing her arms. "Why was it buried?" Bishop picked up the photo from the table and studied it for a long time. "Her name was Dr. Mara Glenn," he said quietly. "We called her Redbird. Systems engineer. Brilliant mind. She designed most of EMB-09's internal tech, the neural matrices, the pulse core." "The what?" He didn't answer. In '87, during the last phase of testing, she and the prototype both vanished. No trace. Emberline claimed it was an accident, a containment failure. But I was there, Miss Reyes. He looked up at her, eyes sharp as steel. "She didn't die in that lab." Marley's throat went dry. "Then where did she go?" Bishop turned toward the container, the light catching the gray in his hair. "That's what I've been trying to find out for 30 years. Marley followed his gaze. The machine sat silent in the dark, waiting, like a beast pretending to sleep. "What are you saying?" she whispered. He turned back to her. "I'm saying she built EMB-09 to move through more than space." He paused. "It was built to move through time." The words hit Marley like a blow. She laughed once, a short, disbelieving sound. "You expect me to believe this is a time machine?" "I don't expect you to believe anything," Bishop said, his voice low, steady. "But I've seen what happens when people try to rewrite what shouldn't be rewritten. And if that machine found you, Miss Reyes, then maybe it's not finished with her." Marley stared at him, trying to find any sign of madness in his face. There was none. Only exhaustion, only truth. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. The streetlight flickered again, and the air grew heavy, like the night was holding its breath. Bishop set the photo back on the table, careful, almost reverent. "You want to know what happened to her?" he said. "Then you're going to have to open what she left behind." Marley looked toward the container, the darkness inside it pulsing faintly with reflected light. She didn't answer. She didn't need to, because deep down she already knew she would. The rain began before dawn, hammering against the tin roof of Marley's workshop in wild, uneven rhythms. Thunder rolled over Jefferson Parish like the growl of something ancient wakened from sleep. She didn't notice at first. She was too deep in the machine's shadow, crouched beside the armored tread, her flashlight beam trembling over steel and wire. Bishop had stayed the night. He sat at the workbench, coffee steaming beside his elbow, eyes sharp but weary. Every now and then he glanced toward her, not as a guard, but as a man who'd seen this story before and feared how it might end. Marley brushed away a layer of grime from the lower panel and froze. There, almost invisible beneath a welded plate, was a thin, rectangular outline. "Here," she said, breath quickening. "This panel isn't sealed like the rest." Bishop rose slowly, the wood creaking under his boots. "You see the clasp?" "Yeah," she whispered, sliding her wrench beneath the lip. "It's small, like a maintenance latch," she pried gently. A click echoed through the container, soft, deliberate, mechanical. The plate loosened, revealing a recessed compartment. Inside sat a steel box about the size of a toolbox, its surface smooth, untouched by time. Marley's fingers trembled slightly as she lifted it out. The metal was cool, heavier than it looked. There were no markings except one, the number 09 stamped into the top. She carried it to the workbench. Bishop followed, silent. "Looks military," he said softly, "but not standard issue." Marley set it down and pulled off her gloves. "Then let's find out." The clasp resisted for a moment, sealed tight by age, or intent. She wedged her screwdriver into the seam, twisted, and the lid popped open with a faint hiss. Inside lay 3 objects: a folded map, edges yellowed and frayed; a notebook bound in dark leather, its pages dense with equations and sketches; and a sealed envelope, the wax stamped with a familiar emblem, a broken wing. Marley stared at the seal. Her pulse quickened. The wax was cracked with age, but the symbol was unmistakable, the same one scorched into the container's side. Bishop leaned closer. "That's Redbird's mark," he murmured. "We used it to tag internal data." "She used it to tag secrets," Marley replied. Her hands shook as she broke the seal and unfolded the letter. The handwriting was slanted, rushed, yet deliberate, like someone racing against time, but refusing to let chaos win. "If you're writing this, it means the machine has chosen you. It means you've opened the box, and the bridge between what was and what will be has awakened. I didn't build EMB-09 to end war. I built it to save memory. Time erases truth faster than bullets. This machine isn't a weapon. It's a vault, a memory that moves, but it needs an anchor. It needs blood tied to its design. That's why it responds to you. You are my proof that the bridge worked." Marley's breath caught. The paper slipped in her grip. "She's talking to you," Bishop said quietly. Marley looked up, eyes wide. "She's saying I'm her." He didn't deny it. Instead, he opened the notebook. The pages were filled with diagrams, circuits looping into impossible geometries, handwritten formulas marked with dates and coordinates. There were sketches of EMB-09's inner structure, notes scrawled in shorthand. One page stood out. It bore the title, Pulse Core Observation Link. Beneath it, in Redbird's tight cursive, was a warning. The system cannot function without resonance. The engine responds not to code, but to cognition, identity. Emotion is its ignition. If the user is wrong, the core will reject the sequence. Marley frowned. Emotion as ignition, that's impossible. "Not for her," Bishop said. "Redbird always said machines were only limited by the people who built them. She believed energy had memory, that matter could hold consciousness." Marley set the notebook aside, her gaze flicking to the machine outside. "So it's alive?" Bishop hesitated. "Not alive the way you think, more like listening." The rain outside intensified. Water streamed down the window panes in crooked lines, streaking the light that filtered into the workshop. Marley walked back toward the container. "If it's listening," she said, "then let's ask it what it wants." She climbed the small ladder and peered into the cockpit. The air inside felt charged, heavy, electric. She reached out to the main console, brushing away a thin film of dust. There, just below the dashboard, was a narrow biometric reader. It was old tech, the kind designed for thumbprint access. Without hesitation, Marley pressed her thumb to the scanner. A green light flickered. Click. Something deep within the machine hummed. Bishop stiffened. Marley. Too late. The hum grew louder, resonating through the steel floor. The workshop lights flickered, casting everything in strobes of white and shadow. Then, beneath the driver's seat, a hatch slid open, revealing a cylindrical chamber. Inside it pulsed a faint blue glow, soft, rhythmic, alive. Marley crouched beside it, mesmerized. "What is that?" Bishop's voice was barely above a whisper. "The pulse core. Redbird's greatest secret. It's what powers the EMB-09. And if she was right, it's not from here." Marley's heart hammered. "Not from here, as in not from our time," Bishop finished. The light flared, reflecting in her dark eyes. The pulse matched her heartbeat, steady, deliberate, as if syncing with her. "She said it reacts to perception," Bishop murmured. "To observation. The core chooses who can touch it." Marley reached out, hesitating. Her fingertips hovered just above the surface of the chamber. The air vibrated softly, then she touched it. A shock of warmth ran through her palm, not pain, but connection. Images flickered behind her eyes. Flashes of fire, rushing wind, a woman's voice whispering across decades. "You found it, my bridge?" Marley gasped and stumbled back. The lights dimmed. The hum faded to silence. Bishop rushed forward. "You okay?" She nodded, chest heaving. "It showed me something." "What?" "I don't know, just memory." She walked back to the workbench, grabbed the letter again, and scanned the last few lines. "If this reaches you, the bridge is held. The pulse core will recognize you. When the machine awakens, it will ask a question. One question only. The answer will shape everything that follows. Be certain before you speak. Time isn't a door, Marley. It's a bridge." She lowered the letter slowly. The silence between her and Bishop felt sacred, like standing at the edge of a precipice and knowing a single word could change the world. Bishop exhaled. Then she did it. She built the impossible. Marley looked back toward the humming machine, the glow now faint but steady inside the cockpit. "She didn't just build it," she said softly. "She left it for me." Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the broken wing symbol on the side of the container, and in that light, for the briefest heartbeat, Marley could have sworn the machine looked back. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the air thick with humidity and the smell of rain-soaked asphalt. Sunlight bled weakly through the workshop windows, catching the thin trails of steam rising from puddles outside. Marley hadn't slept. She sat cross-legged on the cold floor, the letter from Redbird unfolded beside her, the pulse core still faintly glowing in the cockpit of the EMB-09. All night she'd read and reread the words until they blurred. When the machine awakens, it will ask a question, one question only. She tried to imagine what that question could be. When? Where? But the last line of the letter haunted her most. Time isn't a door, it's a bridge. A bridge had two sides, and she was standing on one of them. Bishop arrived just after sunrise, his coat still damp from the rain. He looked older than the night before, the kind of tired that came from decades of running from the past. "You've been here all night," he said quietly. Marley nodded, her eyes fixed on the machine. It hasn't stopped humming." He stepped closer, peering inside the cockpit. The pulse core was brighter now, its rhythm synchronized with something unseen. "It's responding to you," he murmured. "She must have tied its systems to your DNA, your neural pattern. You're the final key." Marley turned to face him. "You said she disappeared. What if she didn't? What if she's me?" Bishop's eyes flickered with something between fear and awe. Then the bridge has already worked once. The air in the shop felt charged again, that same low vibration from the day before returning. Subtle at first, then growing. Marley climbed the ladder into the cockpit, her movements steady, deliberate. She'd spent her life fixing engines, but this was the first time she felt one breathing back. The dashboard lights flickered to life as she sat down. The cracked leather seat was cold under her palms. On the right side of the console was a small indentation, a key slot half hidden beneath a panel. Bishop reached into his pocket and produced a small, brushed steel key. "She left this in my locker," he said, handing it to her. "I never knew what it opened, until now." Marley took the key. It was warm, too warm. She turned it over in her hand, then slid it into the slot. A sharp click echoed through the cockpit. The hum stopped. The world outside seemed to freeze. For a heartbeat there was only silence. Then a calm, synthetic voice filled the air. Female, measured, almost human. "Temporal core engaged. Final operator confirmed. Marley Reyes. You may proceed." A thin screen descended from the ceiling. Static shimmered across it before forming images. Vast, fragmented, too vivid to be imagination. Cities drowning beneath oceans. Forests burned to ash. Streets filled with smoke. Riots, collapsed towers. Each image bore a date in the corner. 2028, 2034, 2091. Marley's chest tightened. Then the sequence shifted. The same cities appeared again. Rebuilt, green, alive. Children running through the flooded streets now turned to gardens, solar grids stretching like veins across rooftops. Headlines flashed, peace accords signed, Global Restoration Initiative, world reconnected. The same years, different choices. Bishop stepped forward, slowly, his voice shaking. She wasn't trying to escape the past. She was trying to understand the future. The screen brightened, and the voice returned. There is no fixed future. Only choices weighted with consequence. Do you wish to alter the thread? Marley stared at the question. It wasn't just words. She felt it resonate through her, vibrating in her bones. Do you wish to alter the thread? Her reflection shimmered faintly on the screen, her dark skin gleaming with sweat, her curls damp against her forehead, her eyes wide with the same determination she'd seen in Redbird's photograph. She thought of her father, of all the nights he'd told her machines carried the stories of those who built them. Maybe this one carried hers. Bishop's voice was quiet. Whatever you decide for all of us. Marley's hands hovered over the console. Her heart pounded like a piston firing on its last rotation. She could end it here. Power down, lock the container, walk away. But that wasn't who she was. She wasn't made to walk away from what she didn't understand. I'm not here to change time, she whispered. I just want to see it. The voice replied, Command registered, initiating observational traversal. The lights in the workshop flared white. Bishop shielded his eyes as the entire vehicle began to glow from within, not burning, not breaking, but unfolding. The air bent around it, light bending like water over glass. Marley gripped the controls as the walls of the shop stretched and rippled. Then, beneath the roar of energy, she heard another voice, softer, familiar. You found the bridge, said Redbird, or maybe her own voice, older, layered in time. Now, cross it. The light swallowed everything. When Marley opened her eyes, she was no longer in her workshop. The hum of the machine was gone, replaced by a soft wind whispering through tall grass. She climbed out of the cockpit and looked around. The world around her shimmered with twilight, a landscape both familiar and strange. The air smelled clean, electric. In the distance, the ruins of a city stood half submerged under vines and glass, reflecting the sun like broken mirrors. She turned back to the EMB-09. It was silent now, its once bright pulse core dim. A faint echo of her reflection looked back at her from the glass, but older, wiser, smiling. Marley stepped forward, her boots sinking into the damp earth. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying a whisper only she could hear. Time isn't a door, it's a bridge. And as she walked toward the horizon, where the remnants of the old world met the birth of the new, Marley Reyes, mechanic, dreamer, descendant of Redbird, finally understood. She hadn't just repaired a machine. She'd repaired the connection between what was and what would be. Marley Reyes didn't just uncover a machine. She uncovered a bridge between what was and what will be. But was it fate or a warning? Tell us what you think in the comments below. And if this story made you wonder what else might be buried in time, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the next discovery will be even greater.